and welcome back to another episode of Our Generation on Air. My name is Alex Bullimore, and this week we have got a bumper episode for you, mainly because just before recording this podcast, I realised we have a game against Blackpool on Tuesday. So, I guess we're obliged to preview that as well. Joining me in this obligation is Micah Chudley. Micah, welcome.
Yes, sir. Hello. How are you, Alex?
All good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. My legs have recovered from being stood up for about 90 minutes, Charlton away. We'll get into why it was only 90 minutes later on in the pod, but yeah.
Well, I was just about to ask you if you've recovered from Charlton QPR, so that covers that nicely. We will get into that in due course, as well as previewing our clash with Sunderland this Saturday, which features a great interview with Graham Falk from the What the Fork podcast. But first, let's look back on happier times, which it seems like a weird thing to say, considering that it was only last Saturday. We managed to claim our first win of the season, and at full time, things actually felt quite good, didn't they, Micah?
Felt really great, actually, didn't they?
I mean, as it goes, it was a nervy game, but in the end, everything works out.
Yeah, I think upon reflection in the game, I think us going 3-0 up probably kind of skewered the kind of sort of, I don't know, the actual context of the game. I think 3-2 was probably a fair result. I know it looks bad because we were 3-0 up and we conceded 2. But to be quite honest with you, I think it was 2 quite evenly matched sides on the day. It's quite funny to say that quality sort of won on the day. But I think when you see that first goal, which I'm sure we'll talk about, you'll understand why the quality sort of shone through on the day.
Yeah, I didn't think it was sort of the perfect performance from us. Like any stretch of the imagination, even in the first half when we're 3-0 up, you're sort of thinking it's not going to stay like this, surely not, because even though Middlesbrough weren't amazing, they still go and score a goal in the first half, don't they, to make it 3-1.
Well, it's still a decent team, isn't it, Middlesbrough?
Yeah.
Whether or not, Wilder feels like he's got his full squad yet, that's still the bones of a decent side.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the second half, you could kind of see the side that was fancied for getting automatic promotion. But from their point of view, it'd be disappointing that you kind of only see about 30 minutes of that sort of side before it fades away. And in the end, I mean, if I rewatch it now, I'm pretty sure they didn't have many chances after their disallowed goal. So, in the end, it might have actually been a well-controlled victory for us. But like you said, the main thing that most people would have seen from that game, if you weren't there, would have been this amazing goal from Chris Willock. So, coming back from injury, a long time out, by no means was this his best game ever, but about 30 seconds of pure brilliance, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's funny because I remember I went with my brother and we were both screaming at him to pass it to Chair, who was running. He was cutting in from the left. And I think there'd been a couple moments in the game before I think Chair had held onto the ball a bit too long. And Willock and whoever else had been running at their defence. So we were just kind of and then he just launches it from 25 yards into the top corner. It's one of those ones where it just perfectly kissed between the crossbar and the post, didn't it? Yeah, very special, very, very special.
You kind of giving him a bit of service here. He kind of gets the ball in the left back position and charges forward, manages to have the strength to fend off not one but 2 Middlesbrough defenders, and then just sort of thinks, I'll have a go from here. Turns out to probably be goal of the season. I know the next day or the day before, whatever, that Watford player scored from the halfway line, but that that's just pot luck, mate. It's a good goal, but what Willock did is about 10 times better. But
I think you've got to think about how far he ran as well.
Exactly.
He's covered a considerable distance of the pitch there.
And then he kept on running because he ended up in the corner flag on the sort of right-hand side for his celebration. So he's literally covered the whole pitch in scoring and in celebration. So yeah, it was a fantastic goal. Seems like we've got a bit of a habit for scoring brilliant goals at home against Middlesbrough. Flashbacks to Chair's screamer last season.
Yeah.
I guess it kind of a similar game to that. They showed a lot of promise at times. We were good at times, and then like it sort of fades out into a kind of even result, or not an even result this time, but a fair result, certainly. The second goal, Zach Steffen does as Zach Steffen does, doesn't he? Like, and kind of, if you watch the FA Cup semi-final last year, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Just sort of like a lapse in concentration. I don't know, like, but he comes for the ball, expects the ball to sort of land in his hands, and then it's just not there. It's bouncing off the back of Jimmy Dunn's head.
Yeah, I think he was he trying to claim that he was like pushed in the back or something?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, I think he's just tried to catch the ball and he's missed it. Like, I don't really know I've watched it back like 5-6 times now. I haven't got a clue who could have pushed him.
No, there's nowhere near him. I think he's just appealing out of embarrassment, isn't he? Because he knows in the moment that he's messed up. And it's kind of, I know we've said that they're going to be challenging at the top end of the table, but if he keeps playing like that, they're going to struggle to get into the playoffs. Like, you can't be having keepers dropping howlers like that. We'll get on to the third goal in very shortly, but he doesn't exactly cover himself in glory for that one either, I don't think, regardless of how well Dykes does. But yeah, there's nothing more to sort of say about it, is there? Like, it's just a howler. It came literally out of nowhere.
I don't think Jimmy Dunn even knows anything about it. It just kind of hits him, doesn't it?
Well, no, as we said many a time on this podcast, he's a passionate guy, Jimmy, and he just sort of doesn't celebrate, does he?
Yeah, because I was thinking he's undercooked the celebration a little bit, but when I actually saw the goal back, I was like, oh, okay, it's just hit him. So yeah. It'd be a little bit cheeky to be sort of like fist pumping, like ripping your shirt off, celebrating one like that. But yeah, do you know what? Like, fair play. Like, we've got that new set piece coach. We just brought in, haven't we? And obviously 2 set piece goals. So improvement, you could say.
Yeah, improvement going forward. Defensively, we'll get onto that, I'm sure, in due course. Has not really seen much of improvement so far. But the second goal, as you alluded to there, lovely ball in by Stefan Johansson. Dykes makes a nice little run. It kind of, if you watch it back, I think they use Field as a bit of a decoy, don't they? And he...
just what I was about to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you can go on.
Nah, I was going to say, I wasn't sure if it was Field or Dickie, actually. But I liked that. I think that's clearly like been done on the training ground, hasn't it? Because it was obviously Field or Dickie or whoever it was has made that run, and they're so preoccupied with him. Like, obviously Dykes has just kind of slipped between the two of them,
and he gets on the right side of the defender, and it's a good finish in the end.
Yeah, so it's actually a really good header, to be fair. Like, it's obviously, like, you know, it's a bit of a clear-cut chance, and the ball's been put on a plate for him, but he's still got a bit to do. And I've seen more than enough QPR strikers miss from that distance in my time. So, it was a good finish. And do you know what? I think he deserved his goal on Saturday. I think there's been a little bit of criticism towards him. Spotlight has been on him, and to be fair, rightly so. You know, if you're going to wear the number 9 shirt for any football club, you know, the pressure is going to be on you to score goals. But do you know what? On Saturday, he put himself about. He gave Middlesbrough back 3 like a really tough time, and he deserved his goal. So yeah, hopefully more to come from it.
Absolutely, and that's kind of where I was going to allude to next. Sort of like, what's your thoughts on him? Because there's been a lot of clamour to get a certain youth player into the side, which I know you're a fan of. But it was nice to see him. You know, it came off for him at the weekend. He works incredibly hard. He just doesn't have the sort of he doesn't have the pace to constantly be causing a lot of problems for defenders when closing down, I guess. So he has got to pick his moments, and he's not, especially at the weekend. It was a really hot day. Probably not as hot as it is today, but it was incredibly hot to keep running like that for nearly. I think he did play the full 90, didn't he? No, he didn't. Sorry, no, he came off.
Bond came on. Yeah,
But
around 70, I think it was. Bond came
to
on.
do the sort of running he was doing for 70 minutes must have been incredibly hard in that heat. So fair play to him. A lot of credit goes to Dyke's way. Mentioned that we've got this set piece coach. It's probably more of a thing for Dan because he's very excited about the fact that we've actually got a set piece coach now. But we've scored 2 goals in this game from it. But across the last 3 games, including Charlton, we have conceded 3 goals either from a set piece or from like the rebound of a set piece. So, do you think it's probably time that they had a look at what they're doing in the setup for corners, especially because this was something that we seemed to start to do last season. They've carried it over to this year, except that we've got all of our players back in the box now, and we've still got that sort of like there's 4 players on the 6-yard box.
Yeah.
And the goal kind of comes from it because Dickie's there, like, but he can't do much because I can't remember who it was. Is it Brooks or something? I don't know. He like kind of Crooks or something. Is that his name? I've completely forgotten. It's something like that.
I think it's Crooks. Is it Crooks?
Crooks. But he like gets a run on him because whoever's like picking him up just leaves him, and he gets a run on it, and he's able to just head it into the back of the net. I don't understand why. Maybe I'm, not that tactically minded, but for me, it doesn't make sense why you'd have Jimmy Dunn and Dickie and 2 of your other probably biggest players standing on the edge of the 6-yard box and not sort of marking a player anyway, and letting their big players get a run at our centre backs.
Yeah, I didn't understand it, to be honest with you. You say that it might be time to have a look at it. Honestly, it was time to have a look at it in March because it was getting ridiculous. It was getting absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, I don't really remember what much about the goal at the time in the stadium, but having watched it back, yeah, you could probably argue that maybe Dickie should do a little bit better there. But in terms of the corner setup, I guess the only thing I can really do is kind of give this new guy and the new setup the benefit of the doubt. It might be a situation that, like, look, we've gone completely different direction with how we're going to set up defending corners. So maybe it's a thing of like, oh, there's going to be teething pains. We're going to concede a couple of goals. There's going to be mishaps. I do think it needs to sort of be fixed soon, because I do think we are probably getting a bit of a reputation as a team that, like, from set pieces, we can get at QPR. They've conceded countless goals from set pieces since March. Like, we're going to target them. We're going to work on our set pieces in games. So yes, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But the clock is definitely ticking before it becomes an issue.
I think that the thing that annoys me as well is that we've got these 11 players back. It's something that my dad rabbits on about all the time. Why not just leave someone up the pitch? Because when you leave, say, Chair's not going to be like that useful in defending a corner. Smallest player on the pitch most of the time, unless Thomas is playing. If you have him like right up the top of the pitch, at least one, probably more likely 2 of the opposition players are going to get pulled back to mark him, because no one. That just seems to be how it goes nowadays. Like, they always have 2 players in defence now if you leave someone up top. So why aren't we doing that? Why are we allowing them to have just having this crowded box where everyone's marking someone apart from 4 of our biggest players? And then we're not leaving anyone on the edge of the box either. So there's been 2 goals, 2 very well taken goals, 2 fantastic strikes in the game against Charlton and the game against Blackburn. But it's clearly not giving our players the time to actually close down the player at the edge of the box. And you could argue that they need to run quick or whatever. But, like, why not just put someone there anyway, so that shot can't be taken so easily? Why is it? Like, because otherwise the player's going to have to turn, react, and go towards it. In that time, the player's already got the ball. And it's happened twice now.
That was really winding me up. Middlesbrough, not so much, because obviously we were winning and the sun was out. But on Tuesday against Charlton, it was very much like, it's just so much open space, like between like the edge of the box and the halfway line. And it was like, I get it, we're not like the quickest team by any means, and we don't like particularly counter attack well, but it's like, just give yourself a bit of a chance. Like, obviously you've got the more critical issue, like you've said, which is that like we conceded two, like, to be fair, screamers, really, really good goals, but we've conceded two of them because there's nobody ever on the edge of the box. That's the more pressing part. The part I'm concerned about as well is like if you win the ball back from a corner, it's a counter-attacking opportunity. Like, you, more often than not, if you've won the ball back from a corner, the two defenders, like you mentioned, that will be on the halfway line, typically won't be defenders, because they'll have their defenders in the box trying to head it in. So you'll have like one of the smaller players on the pitch and maybe a centre mid stood on the halfway line. Like,
yeah, at best you're going to get a fullback standing there, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So why not have like Willock and Chair ready to go up against them? Why not have Tyler Roberts, when he's back in the team, sort of stood there waiting for the ball? Like, even if it never comes to them, realistically, what's Willock going to give you defending the corner?
And it's just taking two of their players away from an attacking situation, isn't it?
Yeah, literally exactly that. So
putting numbers back in your favour again.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. Again, like I said, I'm willing to give the set piece coach and the new coach team the benefit of the doubt, and maybe like that'll be the last corner we concede all season, and we'll laugh about this in May. But I have reason to doubt that.
Yeah, it comes back to this sort of old adage: everyone's a good player if you give them time and space. If you give a professional footballer enough time on the edge of the box to have a look at the ball and then have a strike at it, you'd like to think that most of the time it's going to be on target. If you're giving them why are you giving them the opportunity? Just
over and over.
Because I didn't see the game against Blackburn, but they didn't go on to win by a bigger margin. They scored one very good goal. It could have been 0-0 if you just close out that opportunity to score, and we win the game against Charlton if they don't score there as well. It seems like a very easy goal to avoid, or a goal to make harder. Like, they're very good strikes, but let's try and make it a little bit more difficult for teams to actually score that goal. Because if you put a little bit of pressure on them, are they going to take a shot? I don't know. If they do, you're probably going to get a blocking. Anyway, moving on to, because we still got another goal to talk about from Borough. They were cooking at their second goal, weren't they? This was coming. Like, they started the second half very well, and this looked like it was long overdue. Yeah,
it was a very Chris Wilder goal, wasn't it? Sort of ball coming across the edge of the box on the wing back, and somebody slotting it home. I do think part of it, if you watch it back, I think Powell, to be fair to him, I thought he had an all right game. I thought he was actually better defensively than he was going forward. But I think a big part of that is that obviously he was up against Isaiah Jones, who's a very, very good player. But Powell kind of gets caught between, I think it's Crooks and Jones. And he doesn't know whether to go to the wide man or come with Crooks, who was running inside. And I think he kind of gets caught between two. And then obviously Dunn has to shift over, Dickey has to shift over. Kakai's kind of left with two in the middle. And yeah, obviously Marcus Force has slotted it away because obviously he's been left in acres of space. But that I think goal sort of comes down to kind of what I was worried about after watching the Palace game, and kind of what, to be fair, I don't think we got punished for it at Charlton, but at times was making me nervous at Charlton, which is that, like, the fullbacks got so much to do. Like, they in this system, they've got a ridiculous amount to do, not just in terms of obviously having to get forward and having to, like, essentially be like wingers almost, but just in terms of the fact that they then have to track back, and then they then have to like slot in and be part of a defensive unit. that's the part that I think is going to take most adjusting to for us, especially in the Championship when so many teams play with back fives or with 3-4-3s or with the kind of wing back revolution that's kind of taking over the Championship at the moment. It's like it's easy to get caught if there's space on your flanks. You know what I mean? And we're gonna have to be able to do that without conceding because 3 games in, no clean sheet yet, and I can't really say I'm too surprised.
No, yeah, fair comments. They certainly moved the ball well. I thought they moved it they moved it quite quickly, and it kind of exposed us eventually. But after that, a bit similar to the game last season, they burn out, and we managed to shithouse our way to a victory via the corner flag and a red card for Lenihan. So, I mean, that was
it's funny though, isn't it? Because I actually thought, until they scored their second goal, they were on top. But after the second goal, I thought we probably, if anything, deserved another. I think Adoma had a good chance that went just wide. There was a couple of others that I'm forgetting. Chair had a good chance right after their second goal. He kind of it's quite similar to the situation at Blackburn where he probably should have passed it to Dykes. Same again this week. Probably should have passed it to Dykes. But I was actually quite encouraged. I was actually quite encouraged by the last 20 minutes because it would be a very typical QPR thing to fold there. But I think in terms of game management and in terms of kind of like resilience, it was a very mature performance.
Yeah. So let's move on to the less. I was going to say, I'm trying to think of something clever there. I'm just going to say it was bad. Just bad, wasn't it? Like the Charlton game was just bad. That nothing happened in the first half, so we can scoot over that very quickly. There's nothing happened at all. So there's barely. I think we went, like you said to me during the game. Like I think one chair went into the box once by accident. Like apart from that, like nothing else happened. But we will go through the team because there was quite a few changes. So Nico, Thomas, Dazelle, Bon, and Adoma all came in. Stephanie Hansen and Dykes moved to the bench. Amos, Willock, and Powell all out injured. And then Armstrong and Roberts made it onto the bench this week. So the first half, as I said, wasn't fun, wasn't interesting, wasn't anything. Second half was better though. There was 5 subs made. Shadipo, Roberts, Armstrong, Johansson, and Drew all came on. And Bill said after the game that he asked them to play with the handbrake off. He, asked them to go at it a little bit more. And this kind of has been, and his, not just that, but his whole post-match interview has been praised a bit by people. Again, I kind of, come back to the idea of what is a manager meant to say after a defeat or a win? Like, the post-match interview is the most pointless thing ever. Apart from the fact that he told us that 3 players were injured, I couldn't care less about what Mick Beale had to say. What he says in interviews is not going to be the most important thing this season. It's going to be what he says in the change rooms, on the training ground. That's where he has influence. And it's, if Mark Warburton said the same thing 50,000 times in a post-match interview, I do not care. Because again, that is not...
He did, by the way.
He did
say the same.
He did, and it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter at all. But apparently that's a thing that does matter. What was frustrating for me in this interview is the fact that he asked them to play with the handbrake off. Why weren't we playing like that in the first half?
Do you know what? For me, the change of the front 3 really helped because Robert, Shadipo, and Armstrong just injected so much pace up top, and I just felt like in the first half the ball was just getting stuck with Chair, or it was getting stuck with Adoma, and it was like there's nobody running on. Bon, he worked hard, but his questions about how good Bon is, they're still gonna sort of linger. But I think with Armstrong, Shadipo, and Roberts, I think what that did, at least for this particular game anyway, what that did is it sort of gave Charlton a little bit more to think about. We kind of played a bit in front of them too much in the first half. Roberts especially was getting on the ball and he was just looking to drive at every single point. I was really impressed with him. I get it's League One, but he was head and shoulders above everybody else on Tuesday for the 25 odd minutes he was on. again, of course, I'm going to mention Armstrong. I like Armstrong. I'm not convinced he's a striker. I think he drifts off to the left too much. So I'm
Yeah,
not quite.
he did that a lot, didn't he?
He did. And for Roberts, to be fair, for Roberts' goal, that created the space for Roberts to kind of score. But I think if people are looking for Sinclair to come in and be a 20 goal a season striker, I think he's got a big future, but I think he's probably as a left winger more than a striker. But again, I haven't seen a lot of him yet, so I can't really comment. And Shodipo, finally, you know what you're going to get with Shodipo. You know, very direct, very good running. The final product still at 25 is very shaky, but I think that's what changed the game for me. And I think Roberts is actually going to be quite an important player for us based off Tuesday night. I think we've got ourselves a really decent sort of attacking option on our hands.
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned about Armstrong there, because I thought it was exciting, I guess, the size of him and seeing him running at Charlton, like seasoned Charlton pros, and sort of, they were scared. Like you could tell, like they were backing away. They were backing away, and he had that keen sort of youthlessness to his play. He just wanted to run for everything, which was nice to see. And here's a big but. He's so raw. To me, it never felt like he was actually going to score. It felt like he was going to get about and he would cause a few problems and he would put pressure on them. And he creates the space for that Roberts goal, and Roberts does amazing with that finish. I mean, we were lucky to see 2 fantastic goals from QPR players this week, but he never felt like maybe because he was drifting wide a bit too much. There was a few times when crosses came in, you're looking for like our massive striker to be in there, and he's not in there.
Yeah, I think that's why I think he's probably more of at this stage, probably a bit more of a sort of like a left winger cutting in on his right. He had a good moment. I think it was his first real touch of the ball where he beat a Charlton player and he's tried to cut it back to Shodipo, but I think his last touch was a bit heavy, so it kind of messed up the cross. So for me, there's a makings of a good player there, definitely. But I don't think we're going to see results from him right away. I think we might with him towards the end of the season. You might start seeing he's a little bit more refined. He's got more games under his belt. Then you might start seeing him as a sort of an option to be playing every week. I think he's going to need a little bit of time around the first team. But that being said, definitely a really exciting prospect. I think we've got a good one on our hands.
Absolutely. As I mentioned as well, Roberts with a very nice finish. Unfortunately, as we've already mentioned, there was probably a better goal at the other end to take it to 1-1. I thought, like we're mentioning with Armstrong drifting wide, there was never enough players actually getting into the box.
No, not in
right
the first
into the
half
centre.
either.
Like there's no one in there. There was plenty of Charlton players back, and you look across and Shodipo's maybe at the back post. Roberts probably more edge of the box. It just didn't seem like we were attacking with enough bodies. But they didn't really seem interested throughout the whole game, did they? Apart from that sort of last bit of the second half.
Yeah, which I was surprised by, because all the comments that Mick Beale made pre-game about the players saying, "Oh, you need to earn the shirt," like I think West London Sport hinted that the players didn't like how much Warburton chopped and changed in certain games. So Mick Beale come in and said that the players feel you should earn the shirt. So I thought we'd see kind of a straight out the blocks kind of performance that we saw for the first 30 at Blackburn and against Middlesbrough, but it was very laboured, very slow. It was kind of felt like QPR felt all they had to do was kind of show up that they'd win.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get the pain of penalties. I mean, I like Senny, but I don't think you'll find a worse goalkeeper with a penalty rate. We've had a lot of penalty shootouts recently, but he has not been near many of them.
Has he saved one yet?
Apparently, you'd have to go back to the Everton game where he saved the Tom Davis penalty, apparently.
Barely even remember that.
But I think he definitely had to retake one because he came off his line, and that was like, don't forget the penalties in that game. It went to like the final score on penalties like 8-7 or something like that. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it was a long shootout, wasn't it?
yeah. So
Um,
plenty have gone past him, and
yeah.
apart he could have saved the last Charlton penalty, which is frustrating. But for like the first three, he had no idea which side to go. Like he just was nowhere near him.
I've full disclosure now. I've got to be honest with you. Because I had to drive because I was late for the game. Basically, I thought the game kicked off at 8. So
It's not like you to be late for something, is it?
no, of course not. And yeah, so there I am arriving, parking at Charlton at 10 to 8, thinking, yeah, got here nice and early. Game's been going for 5 minutes. So by the time I got to the stadium, it's been about 15. I think I messaged you, didn't I? About 15 minutes played by the time I got in.
You didn't miss anything.
Yeah, well, it gets even worse because of where I parked my car. After Robert scored, there was only about 5 minutes left, and I got to be honest, Charlton hadn't shown anything in the second half. So I thought I've never leave games early, right? As a principle, I do not leave games early. But I was like Charlton have not shown anything the second half. Like surely I could just go. Literally, as I'm walking up the street to get to my car, I just hear cheering, and I'm like, it's got to be home fans. Like this, it's got to be home fans. So I missed the shootout. Either you can look that as either a positive thing for my mental health.
No, I blame you for now the goal. Forget defending.
Yeah.
I blame you.
Yeah, I'd completely blamed myself, to be honest. I was like, this is because I left.
Well,
yeah, so sorry, QPR fans.
Well, it was a disappointing evening. We can forget about the cup for a little bit until the FA Cup rolls around later on next year. But, you know, games come thick and fast in the Championship. So if you think we've got like midweek off next week, we don't. We've got Blackpool and we've got Sunderland on the weekend. So a massive journey up to Sunderland. And we're very lucky this week because I've been doing the rounds on a few other podcasts, and very nicely, Graham Falk of the What the Fork podcast has answered a few questions for us about Sunderland. So that's what you're going to hear next. And, you know, this week, me and Micah don't have to pretend too much to know about Sunderland because Graham's done all that for us. So we're very, very appreciative of that. And I hope you enjoy. Okay, so now I am joined by Graham Falk, so for the Sunderland perspective on this weekend's game. So, Graham, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. No problem at all. It was nice to be asked on. I enjoy talking about Sunderland, so thanks for asking me to do it.
Perfect. So we'll get right into it. It's been a pretty good start to the return to the Championship for you guys. Is this something you were sort of expecting, or has it come as a welcome surprise for you?
It's a funny one, really, because I think you always expect with Sunderland sometimes the worst, but I think going back to when Alex Neil took over, he's just really changed a lot of the mentality in the club. And I think sometimes you need, especially with a club like Sunderland, especially when we were playing in League One, sometimes you just need a manager that will just drag you up by your bootstraps and just, I mean, that's probably not giving him enough credit. His tactics were spot on. His substitutions were spot on. The way he spoke in the media, the way that he's understood the club. So due to that, you could say the momentum, the fact that we've came into this season with a win and a draw and minutes away from 2 wins, really. And we're sitting second off top. It's very early doors. But you could say that in some ways it's unexpected because of the fact that we've just been promoted. But in some ways you could say it's to be expected because Coventry at home, I think Sunderland would have took almost anyone at home. I would have preferred Reading or Birmingham, no offence. Coventry's a tough game, but you would have took any game at home live on Sky, 40,000+ fans. And then Bristol City, you know, they finished 17th last season. They're not exactly the most difficult team to play. So you could say, in some ways, they've been favourable games to begin with. I think this weekend's a bit of a bigger test, obviously. I think it's the highest placed team we've faced in terms of last season out of the team so far. But I'm delighted. You know, if we get out of this season 14th, 15th, 16th, I'll snap your arm off for it. I think just to be out of League One and kind of out of what is officially now our lowest point in our history. I'm just delighted to be looking like we are going to cope and not punching with our weight. We're just looking like we can cope with this level based on the first 2 games. So yeah, it's been a nice surprise that Sunderland haven't completely let me down. I suppose if you're a neutral, you could maybe understand why we've got 4 points out of the first 2 games and long may it continue.
Yeah. So you mentioned him there. You've got a pretty decent Championship manager in Alex Neil. What kind of football has he got you guys playing?
I think he's horses for courses, which is quite good. I think, last season he kind of flicked between a back 3 and then a back 4 in the playoffs, and you were never quite sure what he was going to go for. And sometimes he would match the team up against teams we were coming up against. Sometimes he would change it and play to our strengths. And I think in essence, he said something the other week, which was really, really important. And he said that when he took over, everyone said Sunderland were a pressing team, and he said he couldn't understand it because we were the 13th best side at pressing in the league. And he's like, that's not a pressing team. That's a team that wants to press, but isn't pressing. I think he's demanding. I think tactically he knows when to make the changes in in-game changes. Sorry, his management's excellent with that. His game management. In terms of the style of football, he likes to get his wingers down the wings. He likes to get Jack Clark running at obviously the right back. He likes to get Patrick Roberts when he plays running at his right back or left back, depending on which side he's there. But a lot of it is geared around our forward line. Ross Stewart is far and wide our best player. He's a player that I think anyone who watched the first 2 games, and specifically the game against Coventry on Sky, will see that there's a reason he scored 26 goals in League One last season, because he's probably a decent Championship striker, potentially even a good Championship striker. And I think I'll be proved right in time with that. And we've got a good young team around him in terms of Jack Clark. Alice Sims has just came in. He scored 2 in his debut. He's had a good few loan spells. We're confident he's going to do well. I think he's got a team that just works cohesively and is well organised, does their jobs, presses when they need to press, defends when they need to defend, and doesn't try to mess about too much. But if I had to kind of pinpoint it, I would say a lot of it's geared around Ross Stewart. But we can mix it up. A lot of it goes down the wing. We'd like to try and sit on teams if we can, but I suppose that might change a little bit going into the Championship, because there's going to be teams where we're not favourites to win, and you might need to sit back a little bit and maybe work on getting on the break. So time will tell. But from the League One era, he likes to sit on teams, get down the wings, get the width in there, and get Ross Stewart in the box.
You mentioned that obviously it's kind of like it's been your lowest point as a club. And with him taking you out of League One, do you reckon that, I imagine within the fans there's quite a lot of goodwill towards him. Do you reckon he's got sort of a free pass this season, in the sense of keeping hold of his job? Not one to sort of take it down like a negative view, but sort of, that you've got a new-ish owner who's never really done this before, and we know that they kind of like to sort of chop and change a bit. So do you reckon that he's good for your manager for a few more seasons?
For me, absolutely. I think we've gone a few seasons with managers that looked like they might have been all right, and then the flaws come to pass too quick. I think Jack Ross, nice guy, incredibly snappy dresser, which I can't criticise him for. And obviously he's gone on to do quite a good job at Hibs, where he lost his job there. I think they might be regretting that in time. Lee Johnson, I wasn't his biggest fan, but he brought in good players. He played some good football at times. We got some of our best performances and results under him prior to Alex Neil in League One. Phil Parkinson, we'll not discuss that. That wasn't the greatest either in Sunderland's history. Whereas Alex Neil, I think when he came in, there was a big clamour for Roy Keane based on nostalgia, based on the fact that someone wanted someone that would potentially decapitate the entire team if we didn't get promoted, which I think it was getting to that point within League One. But Alex Neil came in with a little fanfare, not in a negative way. It was just a case of, all right, okay, well, Championship manager, yeah, he's done a decent job. I suppose that's quite a decent appointment. Actually, just didn't expect it to be Alex Neil, because we basically flirted with Roy Keane for about 3 weeks. But he came in and he's lost 1 game. We're 18 unbeaten in competitive games. For me, yeah, totally free pass, unless we go down like a sinking stone. And even if we did, would I trust him to bring us back up? Yeah, absolutely. Whether he would stay, I don't know. My biggest concern is that he does exceptionally well with us and someone else sees him. I think, I've seen him got taken from Hamilton when he did a good job, and he took then Norwich to the Premier League via the playoffs. So he's managed in the Premier League, and for me, I think he's still got a bit of a ceiling to reach. He's still quite young, and he's been my favourite manager we've had since probably Sam Allardyce, and maybe even more so. And maybe that's rose-tinted glasses because he got us promoted, but one defeat in 18, he's gradually improved us. I love the way he speaks. Everything that comes out of his mouth just makes sense. And I've said for a long time, when it comes to Sunderland and the managers that we have, it needs to be a manager that gets it. And a lot of managers that are liked at Sunderland tend to have the same attitude and the same outlook on life, not just football. You know, Sam Allardyce, Peter Reid, Mick McCarthy had a little bit of success with us as well. Roy Keane, Alex Neil, they're all straight talking, sharp shooting managers that just say what they think. And that resonates with, I think, the Northeast, let alone just Sunderland. And it appears that the marriage of Alex Neil and Sunderland's perfect. And unless things go completely pear-shaped, I can't see any Sunderland fan at least wanting to let him go for a long, long time yet.
You said there that you sort of flirted with Roy Keane for a bit, and I kind of find that interesting because watching him on Sky Sports, I could never actually imagine him managing another club again because of the way he just speaks about the players. Do you feel like, obviously with the benefit of hindsight, you've been promoted now, do you reckon Roy Keane could have ever got you up? Because I can't imagine him sort of like, because he just seems to he goes that step too far. I think he just wouldn't be anyone's friend.
I think it's an interesting one. I think when he was with us, he actually did really well. We liked him a lot. He got us promoted. He won us the championship. He came in when we were bottom of the league. He did probably a better job than Alex Neil in some ways, considering where he took us from. Obviously, he was backed by money and a consortium, and that kind of did help because he brought in 6 players on deadline day. But I think I'm a romantic. I think football fans tend to be, and we have a very good vision of Roy Keane. And I think for all of his, you could say negatives and the way that he speaks about people, which I suppose some people would see as positives, I guess in some ways, if he's got your team promoted in the past, even if it's 10, 15 years ago, and he's got them promoted against all the odds, you kind of go, well, that must work. Yeah. There was some dissenting voices that said, that's not going to work. Like, Roy Keane's not going to work because he's been out of work for so long. There's a reason he didn't have a job. He didn't have a good job with Ipswich. And hindsight is a wonderful thing. I was fully behind Roy Keane, ahead of Alex Neil, ahead of anyone else, because I think when you really look back to what League One was for Sunderland, especially at that time, that was around the time we re-signed Jermaine Defoe. We all know how that went. There was a case of like going with what almost might actually get us out rather than going with something new or fresh or different. And you were just so desperate to get out of that division. And at the time, what I think a lot of people don't realise is that we were like first, second, third under Lee Johnson and gradually falling into the playoffs and then kind of dropped to 7th. And it was just, oh God, we're 7th. Like, we might not even make the playoffs. And it got to a point where the top 2, top 3 were running away with it by sort of March time. So any manager that we had didn't need just to have a good run. So we had, a good run going into the playoffs. They needed to be a manager that had a good run to get us in the playoffs because everyone was beating everyone or everyone was around the same sort of place and it was so tight. And I think a lot of us felt like someone like Roy Keane would maybe drag us through or not accept anything less. Alex Neil is a very similar kind of manager, not in the way that he speaks about people. He's very blunt in the same fashion. I think he's actually a better tactical manager. I would never tell Roy that to his face because I value my life. But I think in hindsight, Alex Neil was always the better appointment. But for maybe similar reasons that people thought Roy Keane might have been the right appointment. But in hindsight, you've got to say Alex Neil was just, the marriage just fits, and Roy Keane would have probably, if not the wrong choice, not a right as a choice as Alex Neil was.
So unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you about the Netflix documentary now.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Kirill Lewis Dreyfus, club majority shareholder now, and I think, is it Charlie Meaven who's no longer part of the club in any way?
Methan, yeah.
Are you kind of hoping that the club's moved on from the sort of crazy and stupid things that were documented in that documentary? Because for the wider footballing public, unfortunately, it sounds like we're not going to get another series of that. But for you guys, it's probably a welcome relief.
It's part of me that wishes it was there last year, but then with the the same thing have happened if cameras were there. I don't know. I mean, it was funny because the first season I actually really enjoyed, as painful as it was to watch, because that was the worst season I ever remember following Sunderland. And I mean, we've obviously been at lower ebbs in League One since that championship season, but it was so demoralising getting relegated twice. I just remember it being a really sad time. I mean, I've been a season ticket holder since '97. I've been going to Roker Park since '93. And I just didn't want to go anymore. Like, I travel every single week from Glasgow, home every single game, the majority, 6 or 7 away, 7 or 8 away games, should I say. So to say the majority wouldn't be right, but I was in Portugal the other week for our pre-season games. And, I love Sunderland, and I didn't want to go anymore because we were getting beat 2-0 at home off, Brentford, Ipswich, Villa beating us 3-0. And it was like, not that any of those teams shouldn't beat us, but it was just like, I'm just turning up here because I have no other option, because this is all I know. And it was awful. So the season was disgusting. And I would hate to ever live through that ever again in my life. And because you knew the club was in the wrong direction as well. Under Ellis Shaw, obviously our previous owner prior to Donald and Methven. But the series itself really shone a light on Sunderland and why we kept going anyway, even though we didn't want to. And that was what I really liked about season one. So I've actually got a bit of affection for season one, because I think when people watched it, it's nice now when, not that Sunderland were an unknown club, we're obviously a big club, but I think when you mention Sunderland now, someone goes, oh, I love that first season. That second season, which we'll come on to, is a bit of a different conversation. But the first one, people go, you lot are mad. You were rubbish and you kept going. And it's like, yeah, that's all I know. Like, that's kind of all we have. And it showcased Sunderland as a city. And certainly the Sunderland I remember, unfortunately left 10 years ago, exactly what the city and the people were about. And I loved it. But the second season, I'm quite happily put in the bin because of all the reasons you said before. It's incredibly entertaining TV, but awful as a Sunderland fan. And I don't know whether you notice and whether the fans will notice, and I assume not so, but I had a small part in season 2 where I interviewed Charlie Methven via a podcast, and we had a disagreement about Will Grigg. So it's fair to say, I think if anyone wants to watch it back, I think it's episode 4.
I will be now. I will.
We didn't get on. We just didn't get on. And
I can't blame you, because the guy comes across as a complete idiot. Like, it just in everything that he does. I felt kind of not sorry, but sort of like the other guy seemed sort of out of his depth, but it didn't seem malicious or anything. The other Methven was just an idiot. Like,
I think for me, and maybe this is, and I like to speak as positively as I can about people, but mess with my football club and it becomes a bit of a different matter. For me, he just strikes me as someone that didn't get Sunderland, and someone that looked down on Sunderland and looked down on North and treat us a bit like Luddites. And I think, if you watch back the episode where I discuss the team, he tries to speak me down and he tries to say that it's not the place to discuss that. And it is the place to discuss that. I'm a fan asking you questions about my football club. We as fans are in the chair here, mate. Not you, who doesn't know much about the club. And a lot of things came out about him, that he'd said stuff about the club. He said that, we didn't take enough to Wembley against Charlton. We took 35,000 there 6 weeks after we went to Wembley. The North is not an affluent area. It's not. We can't afford to go to Wembley every 6 weeks. We want to. We can't afford those season tickets in every single away game. We've got a daft bunch that do, and will spend their last penny. I knew someone the other week that went to, can't remember which away game it was now, but I think it was Bradford in pre-season, and they went down with not a penny in their pocket. They had enough for a ticket and they went down, didn't eat, didn't drink, went down to the game. And he would almost treat that with contempt, as if you should be going to every game. That's what you should be doing, that support. And it just, for me, I wasn't on board with it. And there's a lot of questions about how they bought the club. I won't go into that because I don't want to get sued, which I think he potentially might have considered doing at some point. Stuart Donald was kind of, I kind of agree in a way. I don't feel sorry for him as much, knowing what he was part of. I've got little sympathy, but watching it, I can understand why people were like, oh God, this guy's completely out of his depth. I mean, the Will Grigg situation was just ludicrous. Don't get me wrong. At the time, fans wanted Will Grigg to be signed. We'd lost Micah, who was a massive part of that season, and we probably would have got promoted, in my opinion, if we'd kept him. He went, agents and things happened. We don't know the full story. Obviously, the way it was edited, it was like Micah had went because his agent had told him and done a number, but that's good editing, isn't it? You never really know unless you're actually in the conversation in that guy's head. And Josh Madger's certainly remembered more fondly than those two. The weird thing for me with Stuart is that he obviously isn't a majority owner anymore, but he said on a podcast, when I'm not wanted, when the fans let me know I'm not wanted, I'll go. He's been told numerous times and he's still here. Yeah. He still has an ownership stake, and he might not be very vocal with it. He might not be around the club, but he still has a stake. And like, with all due respect, I don't wish him any ills or any airs. I don't want anything necessarily bad to happen to him, like him to, his business is to liquidate, but we don't want him. We haven't for a while.
Yeah. It's time for him to move on, is it? Like, in a sense, yeah.
For me, stop hanging on for extra money, mate. If you don't want to be here and you said you leave when the fans don't want you, we've made it pretty clear. But of the two of them, Methven for me was definitely the more evil of the two. And I will use that word because my football club means a lot to me, and I'm very pleased he's gone. And hopefully with Kirill, there's question marks. There's certain people he's got within the club still that I'm not too happy with. But in the main, I'll give him a fair crack of the whip. He's got us promoted under his stewardship, and he's brought good managers in, and he seems to have some sort of idea of how to run a football club.
There's always a danger with bringing in new owners like this that you can kind of just sort of wave them in and just sort of go, yeah, we'll take anyone in, sort of, because nothing could be worse than what we've already got. And QPR certainly a club that's been fond of doing that in the past, just before our current sort of ownership structure came into place. The two guys that were leading us beforehand were just a nightmare.
A lot of it. That was a lot of the thing with Stuart and Charlie. Yeah. Well, it can't be worse than what we've just had. So even though these guys sound a little bit too, Etonite from our liking, and sound like they might not quite get us as a community and as a football club, it can't be worse than that.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. Let's move on from that point, because we've got a former QPR player to talk about, Jack Clark, someone that you've already told me that you quite like. So, as I've mentioned already, he was someone that didn't really feature that much for us, partly due to the fact that he looked like he wasn't going to be able to play first team football in the second division. He kind of became more famous for QPR fans because of a social media video that from like a team meal or something like that. They were playing the trick on him. They got the spoons where you hit him over the back of the head or something like that. He was the unlucky one in the middle. So like he's like sort of like trying to hit someone on the head and then let someone else do it, and he just gets smacked around the back of the head. So they're just like the club, the players are making fun of him. That's why he gets remembered, I think, more than most. And that was a pretty bad explanation of the situation. But what are your thoughts on him?
Jack's an interesting one. I think Sunderland fans as a whole might view this very differently than I do, but I can only ever give my viewpoint, and hopefully it's a fair assessment. When he first came, obviously he'd been at Stoke, he'd been at QPR, and we knew that he hadn't done much at both of those clubs, but we knew that he'd been promoted with Leeds and was a big part of their team. So you thought, well, League One, he came in with a lot of young players that we signed recently that are around 20, 21, 22, 23, that need a bit of a kickstart or have a potential retail value, which I think a lot of teams do, but it makes sense. He came in, he had a good few substitute appearances, he got a lot of pace, an awful lot of pace. But for the first, I think, 3 months, he drove me absolutely mental because we played him on the left and he just cut in every single time. And it absolutely drove me balmy because I was like, just go down your left. And I thought a bit of a one-trick pony, and I think some fans felt the same, but you can see he had talent. Towards the end of the season, and it's funny because I don't really take much notice of Sky Sports pundits, but I can't remember who it was, but I did take notice of one, and they were pinpointing how much space he creates for our left back when he cuts inside, and how much width it gives us when he cuts in, because of the way Dennis Serkin, who's our left back, can get down. I thought, oh God, yeah, that's right. And also coincidentally at the same time, he started going on his left a little bit more and kind of giving the fullbacks an option to make. You know, he's questioning them. And towards the playoffs, he came off the bench against Chef Wed in the second leg, made a great run down the left-hand side. I thought he was going to cut in, and I screamed at him to go down his left, which he did. So I can't take credit for it, but I did scream it at him. He went on his left, put the ball in. Patrick Roberts comes in from the opposite wing, puts in the bottom corner. We go to Wembley, and the rest is history. So when we signed him, I was quite pleased. I thought, you know what, he's done quite well. He's shown what he's about a little bit, and maybe in time this boy will develop into a better player. He's won the championship, I think, with Leeds, or he's been promoted from the championship. So he's obviously got something about him, because he didn't just play 1 or 2 games. This season he's been really good. He had his best game for us probably on Saturday against Bristol City. He absolutely tortured their fullback. The fullback could not cope with him. He kept dragging him to the line and cutting in, and the boy just didn't know what to do with him. He had an awful lot to do with our winning goal. He probably is unlucky not to have an assist, because he put in a tremendous ball for Ellis Sims, who scored 2 harder goals, and he missed from about 4 yards out. You could say it was a good save, I suppose, and I'm sure he'll not mind now that we've won the game, and I certainly don't. But Jack was excellent on Saturday. For me, man of the match. And the game prior to that, he scored against Coventry. So I think for us as a fan base, he definitely fits the model of what it seems Speakman, who's our head of recruitment, wants, and what the club wants. And he started the season really, really well. And for me, he would be a definite starter on Saturday. And if QPR fans don't rate him too much, maybe that's something he wants to prove he's wrong a little bit. So
yeah,
100% would have him in the team. But for us, he's got better and better.
Yeah, well, it's nice to hear that he's actually. I think he's sort of someone that needs a home, because the move to Tottenham never really worked out for him, just bouncing around. So, you know, I think there was, you know, always talent there, but he was never going to get into our first team at that time for him, sadly. So he never really played that much, but he was always just sort of on the bench. And our fans sort of react badly if you just have like a sort of average game, it seems to be. Whilst we're on the topic of transfers, how's your squad shaping up towards the back end of the window?
We need numbers. I'd say the players we brought in, I'm happy with, but a lot of them, if you look through our list, a lot of them are like players from last season that we had on loan, which is no bad thing in any way, shape, size, or form. But I think when the season ended, we had Patrick Roberts, who had signed in the January. He'd only on a 6-month contract. So I think we had first option, but he was technically out of contract, as was Bailey Wright, as was Lyndon Gooch. They were all, in my opinion, vital to at least give a contract as part of the squad. As it is, Lyndon Gooch, surprisingly, he's played the most of them out of position, but he seemed to develop into a half-decent right back, although that's a debatable point. So we got all those signed up. That was important. I think we all are big fans of Patrick Roberts. He actually hadn't started a game in the league yet, but we all like him. Bailey Wright is a leader at the back. He's the same. He hasn't started a game yet, but he had a shorter pre-season because he was playing for Australia in the playoff games of the World Cup, so that's maybe understandable. In terms of new faces, we signed Ali Ajesi, who came from West Ham. Really highly rated at West Ham. He's like their under-21s captain, I think. Had loans at Accrington and somewhere else. I can't quite remember where, but came in kind of out the blue, and the highlights you've seen have been great, but we haven't seen him on the pitch yet. We might see him tonight against Chef Wed, obviously, because we're talking before a Carabao Cup game. The big one for me would probably be Ellis Sims, who we brought in. We definitely needed another striker to compete, at least with Ross Stewart. We had Nathan Broadhead last year, who some fans might disagree with me on this, because would he get in the first team because of Sims and Stewart? I don't know. But Nathan Broadhead was excellent for us last year. He scored 10 and 20. He's got well-documented injury issues. Unfortunately, he's gone to Wigan. The rumours are because he felt he wouldn't get guaranteed first-team football, which is fair because Stewart's our striker.
And it's a brave decision to make as well, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. I would have liked him here as like a third choice, 100%. But I think the way Ellis Sims played on Saturday, I can understand why he feels he might not get in. Sims obviously was on loan at Hearts last season, did very well. Had a really good season with Blackpool when he got them promoted. And he looked excellent. He looked strong, athletic, powerful. And the other player we brought in was Dan Ballard. I think we paid almost 2 million for him, which is mad. We haven't paid money for anyone since Will Grigg, and obviously that's scared us off from spending money on anything. Ballard was a great signing. I think Burnley made the bid, and we thought, well, he's going to go to Burnley, recently relegated Premier League club. He's had a full season at Millwall last season, and he was also part of that Blackpool team with Sims that got them promoted. He looks a real unit. I wouldn't say he was shaky on Saturday, but we conceded 2 goals. That's not great. But he looks like a real asset, and Millwall fans and Blackpool fans were like devastated that he didn't go back. So as much as we are Sunderland, and I know people don't like hearing that because they think it's arrogant, but we are a big club. We have got a big stadium. We have got a pull, and a bigger pull than a lot of newly promoted clubs will probably have. We are still newly promoted. There is still, like, for a player, definitely caveats to that. So surprising that we got him, delighted that we have, and him and Ellis Sims look like real game changers at the back and up top. The rest of the players look like they're going to add to the squad, but we need more. We definitely need more.
Okay. And in terms of a player that QPR fans should be looking out for, I think I know who you're going to say, but who's going to be the player that causes us problems come Saturday?
I feel like surprising you, but then I'll be lying. I'll give you 2 because one's really obvious, but Ross Stewart, there's players in my time that I've loved at Sunderland, and they tend to be goal scorers. Kevin Phillips, I don't need to tell you why I love Kevin Phillips. Jermaine Defoe, I don't think I need to tell anyone why I love Jermaine Defoe. I really don't like Darren Bent because he left us at a really horrible time, and that's a long, long story, but he scored so many goals for us and one of the best strikers I've ever seen. So to have a player at like League One level that, whether they scored a lot of goals or not, would be one of your favourite ever players is a bit unusual, but Ross Stewart really is. I just love him. I love everything about him. I love his hold-up play. I think he's got a good turn of pace. He's humble, which is even nice. He's from near where I live. He's gone on international honours with Scotland, which is always great to see. He got us out the division. He scored the winning goal at Wembley, the only time I've ever seen us win at Wembley. And he is a good player. I think he's going to fit into the Championship, no bother. I think I said last year that if we get promoted, he'll be like a Kiefer Moore, where he's not just, a good League One striker. He'll fit in, no bother, and cause people lots and lots of problems. And got his first Championship goal on Saturday, trademark header. He's linked up well. He caused Coventry problems. People are going to struggle against him. And I know you quite like Jimmy Dunn, and I know that Jay Clark-Salter might not play, but if either of them play, I'm licking my lips a little bit. Because from my memory, which is vastly different to yours, I think you'll absolutely torture them, and I think that could be a big, big plus for us. I'm sure there's players that will torture us from your side as well, but he's our best player, in my opinion. Outside of that, I'd be tempted to say Jack Clark on recent form, but I'm going to say Alex Pritchard. He kind of, for me, he goes under the radar because you're so used to him just being like a 7 out of 10 every week. He's creative, he's talented, he's nimble, he's strong for being about 5'0". But Alex obviously was at Spurs. He went to Norwich or Huddersfield for 12 million, one way or the other. But he's played Premier League football. He's had a big move, and he's had a lot of injury problems. He's came to Sunderland, he's sorted them out, and he looks an absolute diamond. And he's in his prime. He's 27, 28. I think anything good that comes from Sunderland either comes from the head or the boot of Ross Stewart scoring them or Alex Pritchard creating them. So I'd say one of those two to give you an alternative option, but you can probably hear in my voice I've got a little bit of an obsession and love for Ross Stewart, and understandably so. Well,
if he can keep scoring goals in the Championship, I don't mind, because it hopefully means he will be scoring goals for Scotland. So, that's no problem for me. So looking at sort of what your hopes are for the rest of the season, where do you think Sunderland are going to end up, and kind of what would be your hopeful prediction for where you're going to be ending?
I can't get my head around the Sky Sports pundits and TalkSport pundits saying, Sunderland have got that much momentum, we're just going to go back up. I'd be really taken back if we did that. I'd be even surprised if we finished top half, if I'm totally honest with you. Not because I don't rate the players we've got, not because I don't rate the manager we've got, not because I don't think the future is bright with Sunderland, but, be realistic. It's a tough division. Anyone can beat anyone. You can go on a 10-game unbeaten run, beat everyone in the league, including all the top teams, then get beat off like say the bottom club 1-0 at home. Like the Championship, as much as I haven't got a great deal of recent experience with it, we all know what it's about. It's a slog. Not as much as a slog as League One, thank God. But it is a slog. And I think, I said in pre-season, if we finished anywhere between 15th, 13th, 17th, 16th, I'll have that. I think for a long time, there hasn't been a great deal of pride in the club. It's difficult to celebrate wins in League One. And I know League One clubs are going to go, but like, it was never that we felt we were too big because we were there for a reason. But League One, historically, is the lowest we've ever been. And definitely in my lifetime. So when a couple of seasons prior you used to beating Chelsea and stuff like that, it's hard. Like, and whether that's arrogant or not, I don't really care. That's the way it was. You know, Accrington away for the fifth time's it's not a novelty anymore. The first time, amazing, but not the fifth time. Now that we're out of it, and now that we've got players that we like, a manager that we trust, an owner that seems to know what he's doing. I'm very reluctant to say he does because I'm scarred immensely from our previous two chairmans, but I think just a bit of pride in ourselves and, you know, making Sunderland a bit of a fortress again, making the Stadium Light a place where teams don't want to come. I think if we make the Stadium Light a real fortress and we can pick things up away from home, we might surprise some people. You know, we might get like a 9th or a 10th or an 8th. If we do anything better than that, then I'd be really surprised. But I'll take safe and nowhere near relegation and a pretty, not a boring season, a season that restores a little bit of pride so we can build next season and we can say to other players, you know, like, look, yeah, we finished 15th, we finished 12th, we finished 10th, but, you know, look at the fans on match day, look at how many people turn up, look at the club, look at the size, look at what this can become. Do you want to come and be part of it? I think building brick by brick rather than kind of like building an entire house is probably going to be a little bit more of our the way that it should be going and the way that I'd be happy with it going. So 15th for me, that will do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sounds good. And finally, a score prediction for this weekend, please.
I gave you mine, didn't I, on my podcast? But I said head and heart, didn't I? So, right, I'll give you my head prediction then. Because I'm on an opposition podcast, I'll give my head prediction. My heart prediction was 2-1. My head prediction is 1-1. I do think, obviously, with the injuries that you have and the fact that you've had a 1 win, 1 defeat, that's the annoying thing. The game that you won was against Middlesbrough, which I think are a team that are going to be around there. But then again, I've also said the Championship, anyone can beat anyone. So like making a prediction is just so hard. We were minutes away from getting a win over Coventry. We did beat Bristol City, but we also conceded 2 goals. And there was a point where, you know, we didn't look that great. I think QPR are probably the best of those 3 sides. A lot more recognisable players, a lot more ambition than probably those 2 clubs to get promoted this season, although Coventry fans might find that a bit harsh. QPR historically in my lifetime have been a Premier League club and they've got aspirations to be there for obvious reasons. So I think it'll be a tough game, but I think with your injuries and stuff like that, we can potentially get on top of you. The last time we played at the Stadium Light was 1-1, and it was one of the most dire games I've ever been to in my life, and that horrible Championship season. So I think it'll be the same result with a completely different outlook on the game afterwards. So I'll say 1-1.
Well, I have to agree with you. I think 1-1 would be a fair result. And thank you for that nice bit of flattery at the end. It's going to really cheer up a lot of QPR fans. But
I know what I'm doing, you see. That's media for you.
It's been brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on and answering my questions. So thank you very much. Yeah. If my listeners do want to listen to your podcast, how can they find you?
So I think I'm really bad at promoting stuff, but I think I'm on Spotify, I think I'm on Apple, I think I'm on YouTube, and I might be on some other ones. I get emails occasionally asking me if I want to be on a platform, and I just say yes. So I've either signed up for something that's going to charge me and send my credit card details to someone, or I've signed up for a podcast I don't really know. But if you want to follow, I think it's at What the Falk Pod. Actually, I don't think I know that it is at What the Falk Pod. Falk spelt like my name, which is Falk. And if you want to follow my normal Twitter, it's just Graham Falk. I talk a lot about women's football and a little bit less about Sunderland. So if you're not interested in women's football, don't follow me. Follow my podcast, and you can get a lot more on Sunderland. But yeah, there's a few avenues. I think I'm on a few different platforms. I think.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much once again.
You're welcome. Thanks very much.
thank you very much to Graham for answering a few questions for us about Sunderland on their point of view before Saturday's game. We talked quite a bit about Jack Clark. In fact, because of being on his podcast and another podcast, I've talked about Jack Clark way more than I'd like to recently. Micah, he's kind of grown as a player by the sounds of it since playing like twice for us on loan. And I learned apparently, Jimmy Dunn and Jake Clark-Salter both played for Sunderland at different points, and they didn't play very well for them. So he was really hoping that Clark-Salter was going to be playing for us at the weekend, which, unfortunately isn't going to be the case by the looks of it. But going back onto Jack Clark, interesting to see that he's sort of found a home in a sense, hasn't he? Moving away from Tottenham, a move that never really worked.
Well, he found a home in League One with Sunderland. We'll see how he handles the step up. I'll be interested to see him on Saturday, because the one thing with him is that he felt like if we played anywhere that was a bit too windy, you'd worry that he'd even be able to stand up, to be honest with you. So it'll be interesting to see just how much he has grown. But I'm happy for him, I suppose, that he's found a home, and it's not the Tottenham B team. So good for Jack.
Yeah. So let's look at what we'll be doing in this game. Let's look at the QPR perspective, considering we've had the Sunderland one comprehensively covered this week. Let's look at the 11. There's obviously been quite a few injuries. It's gutting to have 5 crucial players out at this point in the season. If you needed a reminder, it's Willock, Powell, Richards, Clark-Salter, and Amos. Now, we don't know whether Amos one and the Willock one is sort of like recurring injuries. Powell seems to have picked up something recently. With the performance in mind against Charlton, where we did play Nico and Dazelle, 2 players that probably will play this Saturday. Micah, are you confident?
I was a lot more confident about around 8:45 on Tuesday. I was a lot more confident.
Yeah,
there's a lot of names to have out in the 3rd game of the season, and I saw some people talking about, obviously, our recruitment policy in recent years has been, we've got a good sports science and medical department. Let's bring in injury-prone players to see if we can fix them up. This is the flip side of it. You get your Sam Field bargains and stuff, and your whoever else we've brought in the last couple of years have done well. But this is the flip side of it, is that we're 3 games in now, 5 players down. You would hope that we have enough quality to beat a newly promoted team, but much to your annoyance, Alex, as people have said before, Sunderland are, shall we say, considered too big to be in League One or the Championship.
And they're certainly buoyant after the first 2 games that they've had. I mean, they got brought back down to earth, I guess, last night with a defeat to a League One side, if you can believe it. Another League One side that might be too big to be in League One, but they are there for a reason.
The reason I say all of that is that you would hope we'd still have enough quality to beat a newly promoted side, but Sunderland aren't your average newly promoted side. The Stadium of Light, it's a big stadium. I don't know if you've ever been. It's a massive stadium.
I haven't, but apparently it's going to be full on Saturday, and it's buoyant.
Yeah. What's it? It's like a 50,000 seater, isn't it? Stadium of Light.
I think to say how big and to justify how significant the Stadium of Light is if England was to ever host a proper World Cup, the Stadium of Light would probably definitely host a few games. That's how big we're talking. And it would get in there before some Premier League clubs as well. Yeah. This is, it's a very impressive place. But let's look back on what we can do. With those injuries in mind, I kind of put together 2 options for our starting 11, and one of them has been suggested, the formation at least, by fellow podcaster Dan Lambert. So if you are listening to this, Dan, thanks for that idea, because I've stolen it now. It's mine. But the option 1 is to kind of carry on as it is, keeping in a sort of like 4-1-2-2-1 formation, I guess is what closest to what we've got. Obviously, midfield changes depending on where people are at. Like occasionally, Field is pressing a bit higher up the pitch and Johansson is dropping deeper, playing that quarterback role. But if you were to line it up on a sheet of paper, as I've done, you'd probably say Dieng, Kakai, Dickey, Dunn, and Nico is the defence and goalkeeper. Field, Dazelle, and Johansson in midfield, and then Chair, Dykes, and Adoma sort of up top, with Chair and Adoma coming in as those sort of inverted wingers. Having said that, I would be tempted to start Shodipo over Adoma.
Ooh,
but I know that Adoma is probably more fancied. I think Beale's already admitted it. But Shodipo offered more against Charlton. His pace alone, for me, gets him in the side.
Yeah, my thing with Shodipo is I love his directness, I love his energy, I love his pace, but I just have absolutely no faith in him in front of goal crossing the ball.
Yeah.
I think that's been a problem with him since he's 19. He's 25 now.
Yeah.
I'm thinking when does he add that to his game?
Thing is, though, Adoma didn't really put in many good crosses against Charlton.
True.
He was poor, which was disappointing, but he was taken off on 60 minutes, which suggests to me that he will be playing at the weekend.
I have a feeling he will start. I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah.
But
Option
there you go,
2, as suggested by Dan, is a 4-1-2-1-2 diamond. So this is something that what Dan kind of wanted to be made clear is that, when we brought Beale in, we kind of wanted him. We were wishing that he was going to be flexible, more flexible than Warburton was at times in his formations. So this is a big call from it the weekend. Like, do you carry on with how it's been, or do you mix it up a little bit based on the fact that we don't have, the best players available? So would you play another winger like Shodipo instead of Willock, or do we sort of cut our losses at this point? Again, it's pretty much the same. Field, Dazelle, Johansson midfield. You play Chair down the middle in more of an attacking midfield role, and then have Roberts and Dykes up top.
Yeah.
Does that tempt you at all?
No, I would be more inclined to stick with the first one. I would like to see Roberts start. I'm not sure where he is in terms of fitness, but I would like to see Roberts start behind Dykes and next to Chair, because I just think he offers just something a little bit different to the other two, in the sense that, obviously we know what Dykes is about, we know what Chair's about. You've got a little bit more directness, you've got a little bit more sort of running in behind Roberts as well, and you've kind of got that. You've got a little bit of that sort of tendency to want to hold the ball up, which I think might actually, again, I'm speculating here, I don't know, but it might actually just free Dykes up a little bit, because a lot of times the complaint with Dykes is always dropping too deep to hold up the ball or whatever. You bring in a big physical presence like Tyler Roberts to do that, you might allow Dykes to sort of just focus on being a nuisance for the centre back a bit more. I don't know, I'm just speculating. But I would stick with the first one, to be honest with you.
Fair enough. Yeah, I guess that's kind of all we can touch on with the Sunderland game coming up. Let's have a quick look at the Blackpool match, and let's look at them. They've started sort of so-so, 13th place. They're on the same amount of points as us. 1 win, 1 loss. 1 win against Reading, 1 loss to Stoke, and then a 0-0 draw, and then a defeat on penalties to Barrow in the Cup. So a very similar start to the season. They have just made the signing of Charlie Patino from Arsenal on loan. You may have seen a chant go viral from their game at the weekend. They were last season. They were a well organised side, weren't they? Especially away from home, they looked like a pretty decent outfit. Neil Critchley has moved on to replace Mick Beale, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he has actually. Yeah.
And now they've got Michael Appleton, who is, after being linked with every QPR managerial position going for like the last 5 years, has finally found himself back in the Championship, which I'm sure has been lovely for him. Be interesting to see how they perform under him. But, funny enough, he has managed them before. And in his first spell, he came their shortest manager in their history with just 11 league games played. So he's 9 away from beating that this time or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
he's doing well. He's 30% of the way there. Good job.
Fair play to him. What do you know about Blackpool? I'm expecting, don't take this the wrong way. I might expect you to sort of say, I don't know much.
Well, I don't know much. Nah, what I do know, I obviously, as a seasoned member of the Argen pod, I do my research. But what I know about Blackpool is that they've got high hopes. Their best player is one of ours, in Josh Bowler. I think a few were actually expecting him to go. I think he was linked with a couple moves with teams at the top of the Championship for around 3 million, and he stayed. So he's going to be a problem. The thing with Josh Bowler is he's very much a really great dribbler. I saw one Blackpool fan describe him as the best one in the Championship. But the concern with him has always been final product, goals and assists. Their centre back, I'm going to butcher his name, Marvin Epiteta. I can't remember. I remember watching him at our place last season and thinking, good Lord, they call him Big Marv, I think. I remember thinking, good Lord, I would not want 90 minutes up against him. He looks like a nightmare. They've got some decent players. I think last year, if Blackpool had just survived, their fans would have been happy. But I think they ended up with 60 points. It was a really, really good total for a League One team. So obviously, new manager in now, Michael Appleton. I think he's a little bit more focused on keeping the ball on the floor. I know for Blackpool last year, the sort of stereotype was they're just going to knock it long to Gary Medine, and he's going to give their centre backs a long day, whatever. I think now there's a little bit more focus on sort of building through the back and through the midfield. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they settle in. Obviously, we sort of do quite a similar thing. So I think it'll be interesting to see them go toe to toe with us. I think it'll be another sort of indicator of how good we actually are up against Blackpool.
Yeah. So I guess not much else to say about them. Unless we've got numerous more injuries. I kind of expect the same 11 to play against them as one that played against Sunderland, unless something goes wrong or gets better. But we're all kind of up in the air at the moment with injuries.
Or if somebody new comes in.
Well, actually, thank you for reminding me, because that was,
there you go.
That's a perfect transition into the news that broke this morning from the Telegraph that Ethan Laird is on his way to QPR.
What a segue that was.
What a segue indeed. Don't get ideas about hosting it
not after last time.
So I asked around. Well, I asked Dan what he thought of him, and he gave me a paragraph. So I plucked the best things from there. But even on holiday, Dan is heavily influencing this podcast.
He's not on holiday. He's on a scouting mission.
Yeah.
Where's he gone again?
I've got no idea.
Wherever
it certainly couldn't be me though. Couldn't be me. Not mid-season. I don't.
Of course not.
Ethan Laird, then, pacey player, suits the sort of profile of what we've been looking for. Good dribbler, but defending isn't much of a strong point for him, as he's usually a wing back. Dan also mentioned that had the loan to Bournemouth gone better, he might not be coming to us, but he certainly played a lot for Swansea in the first half of last season, and then basically didn't feature much at all for Bournemouth. So, Ethan Laird, what do you think of this move?
What I know of it is from my friend Johan, who supports Swansea, who was a big fan of Ethan Laird. I've got a couple of United fans who say he's good, but United fans say everybody in their academy is good. So that's not really.
Will Keane was good.
Will Keane was good. Federico Machado was good. Who else? We don't do well with United loanees. That's my biggest fear for him.
But that's because they have so many, and they're all like. It turns out Man United's youth academy is actually quite rubbish. Like,
it's just okay, isn't it? It's just,
yeah.
It's just,
living off the class of '92 for years.
Yeah, I mean, who else? Sean Goss. Good lord, he was their captain, wasn't he? At 23. Might be the worst footballer to wear our number 10 shirt. Anyway, sorry, I digress. I like the signing. I like the player. Again, as Dan said, concerns defensively. I think that's just going to be part of our season, really. I think we're just going to have issues defense. I think Bill's just accepted we're going to concede a lot of goals just to try and score more. I like the move. I think maybe I would have preferred Sterling just based off the fact that I think defensively Sterling might be a bit better, but Ethan Laird may not have to do much defending this season. So we'll see. We will see.
We will, and I appreciate the club taking a U-turn on this. And after I told 2 different podcasts yesterday that we're all expecting Sterling to sign, so thanks for making me look like an idiot. But apart from that, that is everything that we have got for you this week. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much again to Graham for coming on and answering my silly questions about Sunderland. So yeah, thanks a lot for that. It's a great listening. I'm sure you'll all agree. There's nothing much out on the website at the moment, is there, Micah? I think your article was the most recent one about Chair.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So there's not much there. There is, if you fancy paying for it, a few Our Generation columns coming up in programs this season. So I think Ben recently had a go at it. We're all sharing it this season. So I believe it's my turn next. I've submitted mine. So that will be in the program for Blackpool. So if you fancy paying for what you can normally read for free on Our Generation Net, I appreciate it.
It's only £3.
It's only £3.50. It's not that much, and you're giving money to your beloved club. So
it's a meal deal, that is.
It's a meal deal. Quite right. That's quite right. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Follow us on Twitter. Follow Our Generation on Twitter. Subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are using to listen to us. Until next time, come on, you arse.